Hey guitar teachers, welcome back. So today we're talking about teaching first species counterpoint for real. Counterpoint's that class that classical musicians have in college that they retain maybe 1 or 2 bits of information about but never really grasp. Yet oddly enough, here we are talking about teaching it for real. So why would we want to do that if everybody just has to do it and then forgets it? Well, a few reasons. Me personally, I am a huge advocate for comprehensive musicianship, which means that musicians need to be able to compose, they need to be able to improvise, they need to be able to perform. It's not enough to play the music of Mauro Giuliani. You have to walk in the footsteps of Mauro Giuliani, so to speak. My reasons for believing this will probably end up in a video at some point, but for the moment, suffice to say that I focus on building real classical musicians in my studio rather than classical players. So if we disregard all of that comprehensive musicianship stuff, a good reason to do this would be that this tends to be the formula that your classical, your Baroque, to a large degree your Romantic music tends to follow, right? This is the recipe. So by getting extra practice in this bare bones concept, really internalizing it and being comfortable with these sort of things, it'll just make your kids learn the pieces a lot faster. They'll be used to going into the shapes that they're going to need to. Before we continue, remember to press the thumbs up or the thumbs down, depending on how you feel. Definitely subscribe, definitely press the bell. Even if you hate it, sure, let's do that. So anyway, that brings us to the idea of teaching something for real. So what does that mean? In my opinion, in my experience, there are sort of 3 levels of knowing. So the first level of knowing is that you have played something that contains whatever concept it is, and you recognize it as that. The second step would be being able to compose something with said concept. And the final step would be being able to improvise with said concept, which is, if we think about it, really the sort of effortless composition on the fly, right? Things are so ingrained into our muscle memory and our minds that we can just effortlessly let them flow out. And that's really what we're going to focus on with this, is building towards the point where kids can just do this and not think about it at all. So if we're building towards that, of course, we need some sort of pool of nearly limitless possibilities, right? Ways to practice one high note going to another, which is really what we're talking about with first species counterpoint, right? The contrary motion and not having, parallel fifths and octaves and stuff like that. That's really the key component. So where could we find endless possibilities within a given key? Flashcards. Easy. All right, so let's talk about it. All right, so prerequisites for this, your kids are going to need to be very comfortable with thirds, sixths, octaves, and tenths. So any way you choose to teach them that would be great. In counterpoint, sometimes we do come across the odd fifth, or 12th. Sometimes we get, a 6 plus an octave, which would give you a 13th. But thirds, sixths, octaves, and tenths are mainly what we deal with in guitar. So the test for if a kid is ready for this is you can go play a third, play a sixth, play an octave, play a 10th. Once they can handle that, they'll be in good shape. So the next step, I like to set up something like this for them and say, we're going to start and we're going to end on octaves. Now, give me contrary motion in the middle here. So here we have an octave. This D is going to be higher than the C, right? So our bass note needs to go down. So what we would do is octave, 10th, octave. Here, let's say we're playing the open G. So we're starting on octaves and then the melody note goes down, right? So we're going to have to go octave, third, octave. So after they kind of get the hang of this, you can start giving them just random notes and telling them to start with random intervals and then go to other ones. So we could say, start with the third. Or we could say, start with the 10th. Or we could say, start with the 6th. Once they get comfortable with these, we can start adding notes. So you're going to start with the third. I don't know what you're going to end up with here, but you have to start with the third. Eventually, if you stick with it long enough, you're going to be able to say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Give me contrary motion. And at this point, that kid's going to be a master. So, a couple possible concerns either on the front end of this or on the back end of this. On the front end would be, how do I scaffold this? Well, as I stated earlier, in my opinion, the 3 levels of knowing would be playing something in a piece and recognizing what it is, and then being able to compose with it, and then being able to improvise with it. So your very first step, if you want to teach third, sixth, octaves, and tenths as scales, that would be great. If you're looking for pieces, the back of the Fernando Soar method has a ton of exercises on, I believe, thirds and sixths. Carcassi and Carulli's method both have big things on third, sixth octaves and tenths. The very front of Giuliani Opus 1 does too. Wouldn't recommend those. They're very vast. They are very vast. Simplest would just be running them like scales, right? For the next level of knowing, which would be more composition. And this I would treat more as just giving them time to figure it out, right? So I've put a link in the description to my Teachers Pay Teachers account, and I made a couple of worksheets just to go through some various levels of this that they can do on the front end to just gain a little bit of confidence before they're put on the spot via flashcards. Back end of this would be how to proceed from here, in which case, well, we've tackled first species counterpoint, right? But there's still second species, third species, fourth species. Any of those starting to add notes either in the melody or the bass, you can give them opportunities to compose when you get to this step as well. So let's say you give them a bunch of notes and then they have to put contrary motion melody notes above it and then they have to connect it. I mean, really, there's a wealth of activities that you can do. So don't be afraid to experiment and try things out. See how they go with kids. Be pragmatic. If something doesn't work, just revise it and try again. Personally, towards the end of this, I would definitely start making sure they know about things like neighbor tones, passing tones, more linear sort of arpeggios, right? So not the PIMA, but the ones that just play the notes in the chord in order, sort of like jazz players use them, right? So that way, once they get to the point where they can, improvise the intervals correctly, you can say, okay, now just progress with suspensions, and they can do that. And man, it just makes their musical brain work so hard. Like, this goes so far toward creating real musicians. I promise you, if you give this a shot, you'll be blown away. And don't feel bad if you have to do the worksheets yourself first. Like I said, most of us forget counterpoint after we get the grades, so don't worry about it at all. So that's all I have for you. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. May all your kids be perfectly practiced this week, and I will see you next time.